I attend a lot of association events. 23% growth in a year. I've not seen that anywhere else. That's amazing. Give yourself a round of applause. Because our world is changing at an alarming rate, the leadership tools and methods that got us here won't get us there. And today, I'm going to demonstrate to you exactly how we can lead to win into the future of commercial contracting. I call it leading with radical humility. But before I do that, let me tell you about the movie that exemplifies everything that's wrong with leadership today. And I will do it in my South Texas accent, which of course, or Aussie accent. I actually used to live in Australia for 7 years, but no, I don't have a South Texas or Aussie accent. I'm Swiss. I have a Swiss-German accent, and that accent might require a little bit of extra effort on your part. But I hope it'll make the story even more enjoyable. The bridge of the Red October, a Soviet nuclear submarine, is tense with anticipation as a torpedo knives toward it. Impact means the ship will never surface again. Captain Ramius, in the movie The Hunt for Red October, turns to a CIA agent, Jack Ryan, and asks, "So what books do you write?" Talking about books in this moment of imminent death seems like total lunacy. Are you kidding me? We're all about to go down, and here you're talking about books? But heroic Captain Ramius has a plan. A plan he's shared with none of his sailors who are totally in the dark, have no idea what's coming, and have now no choice but in blind faith wait for their imminent death. But at the last second, and somehow predictably of course, because this is Hollywood, heroic Captain Ramius steers the submarine into the torpedo's path, causing it to strike before its warhead is armed. This is quintessential heroic leadership. It's fearless, it's charismatic, it's overconfident. It makes for great Hollywood material, but it's utterly unrealistic and totally outdated. Yet many of us, even subconsciously, are still drawn towards this heroic leadership paradigm, where the leader sits on top of the org chart, has all the data, all the information, makes all the calls him or herself. A paradigm that's been handed down from generations before us. Now, we might not see ourselves as a heroic leader like Captain Ramius, but how many of us, if we're honest, at times have done some of these things? Not communicated enough about our thinking, our decisions to our teammates, and in the process failed to gain buy-in or enthusiasm. Have you been on that bus? You're the leader, you're all excited, you're driving, you're going places. You check on your team's on the other bus, driving in the other direction. I've driven that bus. Held on to control too tightly, maybe even micromanaged. I know, me neither, never. Or, this is my favorite, heroically did my team members' work instead of delegating and holding them accountable, because I wanted to get it done just right, just the way I wanted it. I've done all these things, and I've worked for plenty of leaders and coached plenty of leaders who have, with often devastating results. Turnover increases, productivity declines, creativity suffers, making for very unhappy workplaces and ultimately killing profits. But in a world, an environment that's changing faster than ever, who would have thought 2 years ago that we'll talk about AI in your contracting business today? Competition ruthless, and yet another highly diverse generation entering the workforce, a new kind of leadership is required. A new kind of leadership that puts self-awareness, engagement, belonging, a growth mindset, and psychological safety at the forefront of everything we do. This new kind of leadership is called leading with radical humility. I'm so excited about this because of the last 35 years, I had the privilege to lead teams in the uber-competitive world of ultra-endurance competition to numerous wins and records. Multi-day adventure races, bike races ranging in length from 500 to 3,000 miles. I've led teams in business, academia, and in complex peacekeeping operations in the Balkans, in Africa, and in the Middle East. But do you know what was my biggest leadership challenge? I also served as the president of my boys' school parent-teacher association. The presidency of the PTA, reining in all those parents who are convinced that the universe really was created to evolve around their little darling kids. And I know we have none of these parents in the room today. That's a leadership challenge, if there ever was one. But in all seriousness, I'll tell you a little bit about my background to let you know that I've seen firsthand what happens when we let go of outdated, heroic leadership and embrace leading with radical humility. The three pillars we're going to cover today of leading with radical humility. First, leading like a compass. Having the humility to know that I, as the boss, as the leader, can't and mustn't do it all on my own. I need a strong, empowered team with a clear, true north compass to get it done. The second pillar, tough on results, tender on people. Holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. And lastly, championing a fearless culture, a culture where it's safe for everybody on my team to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas. We'll go through these three pillars. We're going to do two quick interactive exercises for the second and third one, and we probably have some time for questions at the end. I always love to be challenged on the concepts I'm presenting, so that's the plan for today. I have a few of my books back there if anybody's interested in purchasing a book later on. So let's do a quick preview. In my research over the last 10 years, I've consistently found that leaders who embrace humility operate at the highest level. Business, government, the military, even professional sports. So, what do you think the best sports teams across all of time and all of sports have in common? Anybody, just yell it out. What do the best sports teams have in common?
Coach.
Coach? Teamwork?
Best players.
Best players?
They win.
They win, that's right. Communication, yeah. Absolutely all of these things. But according to very thorough research, the dominance of the 17 best sports teams across all of time and all of sports corresponds with the arrival and departure of one particular player. And that player would eventually become the captain. What's more, these captains lacked superstar talent, they avoided the spotlight, they combined focused, aggressive play with the willingness to do the unthankful tasks in the shadow, and they all had a low-key democratic communication style. In other words, the dominance of the 17 best sports teams across all of time and all of sports are led by radically humble captains. Carla Overbeck, the former US women's soccer captain. Any soccer fans in the room? You know, the real football, yeah? She only scored 7 goals in her entire international career, which even for a defender is low. She would humbly always look for ways to pass the ball, even if she could score herself. On and off the field, she displayed great humility, often schlepping her teammates back to their hotel room after an especially grueling international flight. I'm the captain, she says, but I'm no better than anybody else. I'm certainly not a better soccer player. It's hard seeing Captain Ramius say this, right? Out of the spotlight, in training or practice, she pushed herself and her teammates relentlessly. Her incredible work ethic, her back-schlepping humility off the field, her passing humility on the field allowed her to amass huge credit that she could spend to hold her team members accountable. Her being tender on people gave her license to be tough on results. Overbeck hates the spotlight of speaking in public, but out of the public eye, in training, when they were practicing or traveling, she would constantly rally her teammates, her troops around their true north purpose, be the best soccer team on the planet. At the same time, she made it safe for all of her teammates to speak up with questions, concerns, doubts, even the younger players. And in the process, she built a fearless, a psychologically safe culture at the US women's soccer team where it was safe for anybody to speak up, questions, concerns, crazy ideas. Under Overbeck's humble leadership, tough on results, tender on people, lead like a compass, build a fearless culture, the US women's soccer team dominated the competition almost at will, with numerous World Cup victories and Olympic medals. I'm telling you this little story for one key reason. Embracing humble leadership is within the reach of every single person in this room. If it is possible to lead with humility and achieve kick-ass results in the high-pressure environment that is professional sports, then doing exactly that is within the reach of every single person in this room. And the best part is, we don't need to lead a large organization or have a fancy title. It doesn't matter if your business is 2 million or 150 million. It's the small things within the reach of all of us we can all do today right after we leave this room. How we listen to our significant others, our kids, our family members tonight, how we hold our team members accountable tomorrow, how we conduct our one-on-ones at department meetings next week. These small shifts towards humble leadership, when done consistently, leading to excellence. So, let's dive in. Pillar number 1, lead like a compass. Leading like a compass means providing my team members with true north versus a detailed map on how they need to go from where they are to where they need to be. True north compass versus a map. It's the difference between comprehensive delegation, empowerment, and micromanagement. It's the difference between being relevant at the high level versus too involved in the weeds. Let me make it come alive with a government story. And you go like, yeah, right. Have I ever heard an interesting government story? I think this one is actually a decent one. It's a glorious spring morning in Boston. The then Massachusetts Governor Devil Patrick, had a thing of rare beauty as a public official, a day without appointments. He just finished a workout, was driving back, when his phone rings. It's the head of emergency management from the finish line of the Boston Marathon. Sir, we have a horrific disaster, terrible scenes. We need you to come down. We need to set up a command center. Most of us can remember how we felt when we first heard about the Boston Marathon bombing. How we felt upset, vulnerable, maybe even angry. And how we felt for those who lost loved ones and those who suffered grave injury. We can all remember that. But what most of us are less familiar with is the highly effective response to the disaster. According to experts who studied these events, the response to the Boston Marathon bombing has been credited as one of the most effective and collaborative responses to a disaster ever studied. And a key ingredient of that effectiveness was the leadership by Patrick. He did something nobody else did. He didn't give more orders. He didn't make more decisions. He didn't tell people what to do. He didn't rally the troops more. He did something nobody else did. He entered the command center each and every time asking, how can I help? The governor's leadership spreads through all response teams and agencies, a leadership of deferring control and authority to those best suited for the task. Governor Patrick was keenly aware of the very common trap all of us fall in during crisis, the trap to micromanage in order to feel in control, the trap to grab the reins, yank, and overstep into areas best handled by specialists. But leading like a compass does not mean being passive. Governor Patrick relentlessly communicated their common goal, which was to save lives. He allocated resources at a high level, made it clear that the FBI is in charge of the investigation, the mayor of Boston is running his streets. He also realized he could add a lot of value as a trusted communicator of government, giving people in Boston, Massachusetts, and around the world hope. And he continued to enter the command center each and every time asking, how can I help? I sure hope that none of us will ever have to lead through such a horrific experience. But there is a lesson for all of us here. With our world changing faster than ever, our people often do not have time, especially in large organizations, to feed a question up the org chart and wait for a response back. They need to make good, smart decisions independently at the front lines. It might seem counterintuitive, but the faster things move, the more complex our world becomes, the more we need to give up control and authority. The larger our business becomes, the more complex our world becomes, the more we need to empower and delegate. How do we do that? One thing we absolutely need to have in order to lead like a compass is clarity of our common goal. Rather than seeking control, we seek clarity, true north clarity on our common goal. Here's one quick thing we can all do together with our teams. Ask with your team this simple question. What is the one thing we need to do extraordinarily well around here in order to win? What is the one thing between now and the end of the year? What's the one thing between now and end of Q1 that we need to hit out of the park in order to win? And that one thing becomes your common goal. For Governor Patrick, it was save lives. Let me share a couple of common goals of teams I've been a member of. The peacekeeping mission in the Middle East. Observe, because it's the UN, it's about 14 words too long. Observe, report, investigate all incidents that violate UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Crystal clear what, crystal clear why. Note that the how is up to me. How am I achieving the common goal is up to me. As the team commander, I can decide every morning, are we patrolling today? If we are patrolling on foot, in an armored vehicle, in an SUV, or are we actually having a meal with a local mayor and learn about what's going on in his village? The how's up to me. Similarly, 530-mile non-stop bike race across Oregon. Common goal, safely win the race and beat the course record. Safety equals speed. The what's defined, the why's defined, the how's up to me. Do I attack in the uphills, the downhills? Do we start slow, finish fast? Let me share the power of common goal in action, quite literally in action. D-Day. The invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe by the Allied forces had been planned for months and years. But within hours of the planes taking off in England, the whole plan fell to pieces. For those of you who are familiar with D-Day or have seen the outstanding TV series Band of Brothers, anybody seen Band of Brothers? Well, you know that the Allied forces, the airborne troops, were spread all over Normandy. Virtually nobody landed in their designated drop zone. They were spread all over Normandy. But because every trooper, down to the last private, had internalized their common goal, which was to secure key terrain, bridges, roadways, villages, they were able to improvise. They started to fight with guys they've never met before from other airborne divisions, started to form little ad hoc teams of 2, 3, 4, 5, and started to fight because every single person understood the common goal. D-Day was a planning disaster, but common goal saved the day. For those of you who like a little model, here is old school map leadership. I, as the leader, set the goal, and then I tell my employees, my staff members, my minions, exactly how they need to go from where they are to where they need to be. Compass leadership understands that this has never been effective. We just saw the power of common goal, of compass leadership during D-Day. And it's even less effective today. Our world is changing way too fast. New technology, how do we deploy AI in our businesses? So compass leadership understands that while I, as the leader, have the industry experience, I have the seniority, and yes, I have the responsibility, the buck stops with me. Do I really, especially if you're in a larger business, Do I really understand the minutiae of every one of my people's jobs? Do I really understand how to best deploy the latest AI generative tool? Do I really understand how to use Canvas, HubSpot, what Jira is? Probably not. So I set the goal, but then I empower my team members to decide for themselves for how they need to go from where they are to where they need to be. With as much self-direction, with as much creativity, with as much new technology, with as much new innovation as possible. Compass leadership is where team members thrive, and we all face talent shortage. This is how you engage your people. You give them ownership over how they go from where they are to where they need to go. Team members thrive, teams shine, and it's where magic happens. Much like at the Ritz-Carlton. The president of the Ritz-Carlton tells a story about the wheelchair-bound young man who checked into the Ritz-Carlton in Dubai together with his family. Upon looking through the massive glass window out of the lobby down to the beach, he took one look at the ocean and said to his family, "I sure wish I could swim in that ocean." The problem was that between the hotel and the sea lay a 50-meter stretch of soft sand over which the wheelchair impossibly could travel, hence crushing the young man's dream to swim in an ocean. Within earshot of the family was a maintenance worker, and she overheard the conversation, and she thought, "I'm going to do something about it." She quickly rounded up another 5 maintenance workers, and voila, a mere 6 hours later, there was the masterpiece, a brand new wooden walkway down to the ocean over which the wheelchair now could easily travel. For the team members at the Ritz-Carlton, it was just another day as part of an empowered culture where everybody can make independent decisions with a true north compass of top service no matter what. For the young man, it was the first time he ever swam in an ocean. What the Ritz-Carlton is most proud about is that nobody needs to tell its employees to do these things. Nobody told the maintenance worker, "Go and build a walkway to the ocean." And by the way, she didn't have to check with her boss either. Instead, the Ritz has built a culture where every team member stretches themselves, team members inspire each other, all with a true north purpose of top service no matter what. Top service, team members that inspire each other, team members that stretch themselves. That is the power of Compass leadership at the Ritz-Carlton. It's foundational to creating memories that last a lifetime, or as they say at the Ritz, guests don't just stay at the Ritz, but the Ritz stays with them long after they check out. How do we bring it back? How do we make it operational? I encourage all of you to sit down together with your team. If you're in a small organization, bring the whole team together. If you're leading a large organization, bring your executive team together. What is the one thing we need to do extraordinarily well around here in order to win? Not 3, not 5, one thing between now and the end of the year, now and end of Q1. And that becomes your common goal. In preparation for today's talk, I had the privilege to speak to a few of you, including this gentleman. Where is Jesse? Oh, give it up for Jesse. All right. So Jesse does something really cool around common goal. So not only does he do this exact very exercise, he actually took his whole business through a larger than just common goal exercise, mission, vision exercise. But then he does something very few people do. Jesse then asks his employees this question: how can we, at TJ's Professional Painting and Construction, help you achieve your goals? When do you think the last time your employees got asked how we can help achieve their goals? When was the last time that happened? Before they came to you? Probably never. When's the last time your employee asked you, how can we here at our painting construction company help you achieve your goals? This is how you create sticky employees. It becomes a two-way street. It's not just what can you do for us, but how can we help achieve your goals? Does it make sense? And it might be, I'm working towards a down payment for my first house. I want to put my kids through college. Or simply, I want to learn something new. I want to grow into a different way. Or I want to travel the world 2 years from now. When we start engaging our team members at this personal level, we become tough on results and tender on people, which is actually our next pillar. Tough on results, tender on people, holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. Being both tough and tender, having both high touch and high standards is the ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership. Dale Carnegie makes the concept come alive beautifully with a story about the test pilot Bob Hoover. Bob Hoover was returning from an air show in in LA, back to his home base in San Diego, when all of a sudden the engine of the World War II propeller plane stopped working. With some deft maneuvering, he was able to emergency land the plane, but it was badly damaged. Fortunately, neither he nor his 2 passengers were injured. Upon exiting the aircraft, the first course of action he took was to inspect the fuel of the plane. And just as he suspected, it was filled with jet fuel versus gasoline. Upon returning to the airbase in San Diego, Hoover asked to speak to the mechanic who serviced his plane. So, how would you show up with a mechanic? What would you tell the mechanic? I'm gonna break his nose, make him lose a few front teeth, not very HR conform. Here's what happened. The young man was sick with agony. Tears streamed down his face. He just had caused the loss of an expensive aircraft. It could have caused the loss of 3 lives. Nobody would have blamed Hoover for ripping the mechanic for his carelessness. But Hoover did none of that. Instead, he put his big arm around the mechanic's shoulder, looked at him sternly, and said, "To show you that I'm sure you'll never ever do this again, I want you to serve my F-51 tomorrow." By choosing this calm, by the way, any pilots in the room? Few, yeah. By choosing this calm, empathetic, yet very to the point way of communicating, Hoover made it safe for the mechanic to own his mistake and make good on it. From this day forward, the level of trust between Hoover and the mechanic was unwavering, and the mechanic never made such a grave mistake again. Why? Tough on results, tender on people drives performance. But how exactly? As we go through these 4 quadrants together, from soft on results to tough on results, from tough on people to tender on people, let's ask ourselves, where do I sit? Where do my supervisors, my managers in my business sit? And maybe as you think back to your own career when you had bosses, where did my boss sit? The bottom right quadrant is the fear zone. We've all had bosses yell and bark orders, everybody's afraid, everybody's walking on eggshells, nobody speaks up, everybody's afraid. That is the opposite of what we call psychological safety. These are the bosses nobody wants to work for, and we have none of them in the room, by the way, no fear bosses in the room. These are the bosses who light up the room simply by leaving it. The bottom left quadrant is the indifference zone. Here the boss might yell at you, but there's no consequences for delivering subpar work. So people simply check out and do the bare minimum, just avoid the boss. A lot of the quit but stays happens in this quadrant. The top left quadrant, some of us might be able to relate to. Here the boss is so conflict averse that nothing ever gets corrected and standards continue to slide. If we're leading in this quadrant, we often burn out because we end up doing our team members' work. Remember the heroic leader who does their team members' work? This is the people first, results never quadrant. And the top right quadrant is, of course, the high performance zone, holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. And by the way, what is the quickest way to build a trusting and meaningful relationship with somebody? It's to show up with a bit of vulnerability. Now, I think we would all agree, it's no good starting every meeting in tears and my parents never really loved me. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's about getting at eye level with our teammates and saying, hey, I'm actually not quite sure about this either. What do you think? Or, here's what I'm working on. I'm working on becoming a better delegator. What suggestions do you have for me so I can get better at that? Sharing a meaningful personal goal with our teammates shows to them that we too are work in progress and always strive to get better. And we do it in 3 acts. The first act is me. The second act is my share, maybe a goal I have, maybe a little insecurity, maybe a weakness, something I'm working on. And the third act, very important, what am I doing about it? Brad Smith, the former CEO of the financial technology company Intuit, is a shining example of how to build trust with a bit of vulnerability. And by the way, his tenure was well before the corporate scandal last year with the free, not free software. He volunteered to his board to do a 360. A 360, anybody has done a 360 in here? Have a show of hands. A 360 anonymously surveys everybody around you, around your strengths and weaknesses as a leader. So, anonymous survey by your boss, your peers, your directs, and maybe some people outside of the organization. And for those of you, I know Calvin and Jim, what's the experience like when you do it for the first time?
Transparency. Hear what people really got to say.
Yeah. And what about the emotions when you get the results back?
Nervous before you get it.
Exactly. Would you? Yeah. It is a scary exercise when you do it for the first time, because for the first time you get the real deal feedback, how people really see you as a leader. So that's a scary exercise. So Brad Smith did not only do that, he volunteered it. The board didn't tell him he had to. He volunteered it. He then shared his 360, of course, with his board, but he took a step further. He emailed his 360 report, so his strength, his weaknesses, and his action steps, to every single person in the company. He emailed his 360 report to everyone down to the last intern. He even taped a copy to his office door for everybody to see. And in the process, he built humongous trust across all of Intuit. More importantly, he made it safe for everybody at Intuit to start working on their own stuff. Because you know what? If the CEO admits that he's not perfect and wants to get better, maybe I can do the same thing. And Jesse and I talked about that as well. It's all about leading by example. Let's never, ever ask anything from our folks that we aren't able or willing to do on our own. This is an often misunderstood notion. Trust does not come before vulnerability, but vulnerability is one of the quickest ways to build trust. Sharing our shortcomings, for example, with our teammates, while scary, makes us relatable. And by the way, I hate to break it to every single person in this room. Our team members already know that we're not perfect. Why? Why do Calvin's teammates know that he's not perfect? They work with him every day, right? My team, they work. Simply owning what everybody around me already knows is true makes me relatable. Everybody admires perfection from a distance, and nobody can relate to it. Let me share with you how vulnerability built trust, drove results for me at the UN. 2 years ago, I'm deployed as a peacekeeper to the Middle East. Just finished a long day of patrolling the ceasefire line between Lebanon and Israel. It is Lebanon on the right here of the barbed wire fence and Israel on the left. By the way, as you are all well aware, this is not a ceasefire line anymore. The IDF, Israeli Defense Force, started a ground assault across this line about 6 weeks ago now. But back then, it was a ceasefire line. Just finished a long day, was looking forward to go for a run in the camp when my phone rings. It's one of my Swiss officers in Syria. He sounds in distress. Urs, we have a terrible situation. We believe lives are on the line. Nobody's listening. Can you help us in your role as Swiss national representative? He downloads some more details. Before we hang up, I tell him the next day there'll be a leadership meeting and I'll bring up his concerns then. I hang up. I am not happy. I now have to get the commanding officer, the CEO in Syria, into trouble for asking for a change in leadership. It doesn't help that I'm a low-ranking officer and a newly promoted senior, so I have to work double hard to be taken seriously. The meeting the next day. I lay out in no unclear terms the changes that my officers need to see. I'm being very tough on results, very Swiss, very to the point. To my amazement, my voice is heard at the highest level. My low rank doesn't get me into trouble. And the concerns of my Swiss officers are immediately resolved. After the meeting, I was reflecting on this. What made it possible for me to be heard at the highest level despite being a low-ranking officer? I believe the short answer is this. Up to this point, I've worked incredibly hard on relationship building, on being tender on people. A few weeks earlier, when I was first promoted to senior, instead of boasting about my new title, of course not the humble way, I knew to be effective, I needed to build strong collaborative relationships with key people in the mission, and I needed to do it fast. So I pulled out the org chart and identified about 30 people who I needed to build strong relationships with. And then I got to work. Over the next 10 days, I spent every hour I was not patrolling the ceasefire line on 30-minute relationship-building meeting with key members in the mission. During these meetings, I inquired about their personal background, their hopes, concerns for the mission, their expectation of me as a senior. The famous, what does success in my position look like? What does failure in my position look like? No other business agenda up front. I learned that head of mission loved spending time in my hometown of Zurich in Switzerland together with his family. The chief of staff and I shared a mutual passion for ultra-endurance racing. We shared, with a bit of vulnerability about our personal lives, built a foundation for a trusting relationship. And it drove results in the mission from our officers in Syria. We moved from seniority to connection. By now, it should be clear that we don't advocate for relationship building because we want to be nice, kind, or liked. No. We build relationships because it drives engagement, it drives commitment, it drives trust. And I often hear pushback against this. I don't really have time for this relationship building stuff. And I get it, we all have way too much on our plates already. Relationship building is never efficient in the short term. I give you this all day. But it always pays in the long run. We never know who we have to rely on when the famous stuff hits the fan, as it always does. Building bonds with others is a preemptive move, including, by the way, building bonds, what we're doing right here, these 2-3 days. That is relationship building at its best. So I just showed you my relationship map. How does yours look? Here's a quick exercise we can all do to assess and improve our level of relationships. Grab a blank piece of paper, put yourself in the center, a circle, that's you, and then all the people you're connected to. These are your personal, you can do a personal one and a professional one. So these are your team members. If you have a board of directors, a board of advisors. By the way, how many in here have a board of directors in their business? Board of advisors. So that's whole separate talk. We can do at another stage the value of having a board of advisors. So assess the level of relationship you have with each of these people, including the people, your peers here, on a scale of 1 to 5. And then assess the level of relationship you should have with a person on a level of 1 to 5. And you're all engaged in the community. How do you get business? People knowing you. How do people know you? You're engaged in the community. Maybe you do some volunteering. Maybe you're active in the chamber. Maybe some political work even. What is a relationship that should be better, that needs to be better? Set aside 30 minutes. Plan how you're going to ask questions. Plan how you're going to reveal a little bit about yourself. So we're going to do a quick interactive exercise. I want you all to self-assess on this continuum between tough on results and tender on people. where do I sit? There's no right or wrong answer. Some of us are more results-driven, some of us more relationally driven. I'm a relationship guy. I need to work hard my whole career towards being more results-driven. So first question is, where do you sit on this spectrum? And then share with your neighbor, if you're somebody who's tender on people, more relationally driven, what is one tough feedback you know you should have given and you haven't given yet? Commit to that. Doing it this week. If you're more tough on results, what is one act of tenderness you commit to performing? For example, saying thank you to a teammate, by the way, in front of the whole team. Maybe it's an act of kindness, maybe even a gift. So, I want you to spend 2 minutes with your neighbor, where do I sit? And then if you're more tender on people, what's a tough feedback you give? Tough on results, what's an act of tenderness? I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to get this done. Let's go. So, if you wouldn't mind, because we don't have a Mentimeter, can I have, by a show of hands, who self-assesses more tough on results? Nice and high, nice and high. Who self-assesses more tender on people? Okay, so, all right. So slight majority tender on people. Did anybody meet somebody new? Okay. Perfect, great, excellent. So I encourage all of us, by the way, throughout the day, like sit at different tables and engage with not just the people who you work with every day anyway. That's part of the value, of course, we have at PCA here. So, tough on results, tender on people, holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. The ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership. We're moving on to the third and last pillar, championing a fearless culture. The 2 teams are engaged in an all-out competition. Both are in it to win. It's a hard battle with no prisoners taken. One team is a bunch of Harvard MBAs. The other team is a group of kindergartners. But they're not competing in sports. They're competing for who can build the highest structure with the following items: 20 pieces of uncooked spaghetti, scotch tape, string, and a marshmallow. Show of hands, who has done this competition? Okay, so 18 minutes, and the goal is the marshmallow is on top, right? Who can build the highest structure in 18 minutes with a marshmallow on top at the end? The business school students strategize. They're being smart. They make a plan. They keep track of their time. Kindergartners don't strategize. They don't make a plan. They experiment. They talk little, but when they do, it's brief and abrupt. Give me this, no that, put it here, no there. The clock is winding down. 3, 2, 1, and there's a huge cheer from the winning team. Who's winning? The kindergartners. The kindergartners are kicking Harvard's behind all day long. And stunningly, it's not a one-off. In dozens of competitions, kindergartners outperform MBAs by 16 inches. Do we have any MBAs in here? Any lawyers? Any CEOs? Come on, we have CEOs in here, no? Yeah. Kindergartens outperform business school students by 16, lawyers by 11, and CEOs by 6. But why? MBAs, while seemingly collaborating on the surface, are distracted with managing their own ego and status. Who should be in charge? What will they think? Will I look stupid? Will I step on somebody's toes? And then they're going to hold it against me. Kindergartners don't care what everybody else thinks. They don't compete for who should be CEO of Spaghetti Inc. They experiment. They're not afraid to fail. Most of all, they're not afraid to fail. Kindergartners don't win because they have better skills or more talent. Kindergartners win because they're fearless, Because they have what we call psychological safety. They have a psychologically safe culture. So just to be clear, a culture of psychological safety or a fearless culture is a culture where it's safe for everybody on my team to speak up with questions, concerns, doubts, crazy ideas without fear of being shamed or worse, risking my job. And just to be crystal clear, a fearless culture does not mean standing around in a circle holding hands singing Kumbaya. It's not about being nice. It's not about being kind necessarily. It's not about being cozy. And it's most definitely not about lowering performance standards. It's about being direct. It's about being honest. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about lifting performance up. And sometimes as a leader, as we'll see, it's about saying, I screwed that up. Maybe some of you are familiar with the research of psychological safety. It first came out of Harvard about 30 years ago and was popularized by Google, and the research has been replicated across a variety of industries. Airline crews, surgical teams, construction. I'm not aware of a study specifically in painting, but construction, and the military. A culture of psychological safety, fearless culture, is the best predictor of a team's performance. It's more important than who's on the team, the size, the tenure, if it's virtual or in person. So apparently, culture doesn't only eat strategy for breakfast, it also eats talent for breakfast. So if a fearless culture is that important, how do we do it? Here's a simple 3-step framework we can all implement to help shift our team culture towards a fearless, towards a psychologically safe culture. Reframing failure. If we like it or not, mistakes will always happen to us and our teammates. We need to make it safe for everybody to speak up. It doesn't mean that we're going to accept failures going forward. We need to learn from them, of course. But it needs to be safe for everybody to speak up about them. Encouraging speaking up and then acknowledging and thanking. Professor Amy Edmondson, the queen of psychological safety out of Harvard, tells the story about a United Airlines captain who opens every crew meeting with these words. She says, I've never done a perfect flight before, and I'm going to prove it to you again today. Who's flown here? Almost everybody, right? You go like, what the hell? Imagine you're upgraded, you're all excited, you're standing there in the galley, you want to take your first class seat, and you overhear the captain. I've never done a perfect flight before, and I'm going to prove it to you again today. So I need you. I need you to speak up when you see me do something wrong, because it will happen, and I will do the same for you. As you stand there reconsidering all your future United flights, it might actually dawn on you that this might actually be one of the safest flights you've ever taken. But why? The captain is reframing failure for her crew members. She encourages speaking up. She's praising the messenger versus punishing the messenger. She's hugging the messenger versus shooting the messenger. And in the process, builds a fearless crew where everybody feels safe to speak up. The captain knows that there never will be such a thing as a perfect flight. On all our flights home this week, there will be mistakes made on every single flight. Much like for all of us, there never will be the perfect estimate, the perfect schedule, the perfect job. There just won't be. The captain knows that by reframing failure, by encouraging speaking up, mistakes that are made by individuals, including her, the top dog, the CEO of the plane, are caught by the collective. And when she makes it safe for everybody to speak up to her, what improves? The safety of the flight improves. The same in the operating theater. When it's safe for everyone in the operating theater, including down to the last technician, to speak up to the chief surgeon when they see him or her making a mistake, the patient outcome improves. A fearless culture, a psychologically safe culture, quite literally can save lives. I live in Seattle. I'm not going to get into Boeing, but it's a very complex subject, of course. but there's plenty of research showing that a lack of psychological safety, a lack of fearless teams was one of the main contributing factors to some of the disasters at Boeing. Psychological safety, a fearless culture, quite literally can save lives. My commanding officer in the Middle East had a different way of encouraging speaking up by modeling the behavior she wanted us to display. She opened an after-action review with these words: I screwed that up, and I know it. And here's what I'm doing about it so it won't ever happen again. Remember the third act? Her ability to go first then made it safe for all of us, her direct reports, to own our own mess-ups. So here it's my turn in front of the map to share during the AAR what I did well and what I messed up, all because she went first. This particular after-action review led to much better operations on the ground. Operational effectiveness improved by 20%, safety by 30%, all because she went first. I screwed that up. These might be the most important 4 words we can say as leaders. The best and most successful teams understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become invulnerable. The best and most successful teams, especially and particularly in the military, understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become unstoppable. Alan Mulally, the former CEO of Ford, is a shining example of how to acknowledge and thank. The third step. When Mulally, he was previously at Boeing, took over Ford, what was the condition of Ford when he took over? Anybody remember? When Mulally took over Ford, this is a while ago.
1 year.
Yeah, long time ago. Well, actually, 10 years ago, on the brink of bankruptcy. They're losing, yeah, you remember, they're losing millions of dollars every single day when Mulally took over. But when he walked into his first senior management meeting, all the dashboard indicators were on green, meaning everything was going to plan, as opposed to yellow, not on plan, and red, really not on plan. So he turns to his team and he goes, and was all guys, hey guys, seriously, like we're losing millions of dollars every day and there's nothing that's not going well because everything's on green? At the next team meeting, the dashboard indicator of Mark Fields, who would eventually succeed Mulally as CEO, was on red. When it was his turn to speak, he pointed to the dashboard and said, and as you can see, mine's on red. We're holding the release of the Edge car because of technical difficulties. The whole room went dead silent. They all looked at Fields and Mulally, who was sitting next to Fields, and they all thought, dead man walking. What did Mulally do? Did he scold Fields? Did he chew him out? Did he fire him? No. He started to clap and said, this is great visibility, Mark. Who can help Mark with it? It took another few meetings, dashboard indicators, mainly on green, some on yellow, and people observing. How did Mulally act? Did he fire people? Did he chew them out? No, he clapped. And slowly over time, the dashboard indicators were all turning to yellow and red, indicating what was really going on at Ford. And the team could get to work to finally turn the Ford Motor Company around. Mulally is a shining example of how to encourage and thank and make it safe for your team members to speak truth to power and share what's actually really going on in the business. So, how do we do it? Here's a quick exercise we can all implement together with our teammates to help us shift our culture towards a culture of psychological safety with 2 stuffed animals. A killer whale and a duck daisy. At the next team meeting, nominate somebody for the Killer Whale Award, somebody who you've seen do outstanding work the previous week. That person then gets to nominate somebody else for the Killer Whale Award the next week. Then, important, self-nominate for the whoopsie daisy, the duck daisy. Share a mistake you've made, something that you messed up. It doesn't have to be something big. Maybe you misspoke in a meeting, maybe you dropped a deadline, maybe you forgot something. By sharing a mistake we've made, we help others avoid making the same mistake. More importantly, we make it safe and normalize speaking up about our mess-ups. In the process, we help shift our culture towards a culture of psychological safety, a fearless culture. You will love me for this, but we will do this right now. So, here is what I want you to do with a different neighbor. And if it means you have to get up, then please get up. Who on your team gets the Killer Whale Award? So, who on your team did outstanding work this week? And my team, my social media guy, did outstanding work. So, the Killer Whale goes to him. And what was your whoopsie daisy this week? What did you mess up? Share with your neighbor for 2 minutes. By the way, mine was I spoke last week locally in Seattle and I forgot my props, my 2 stuffed animals. And I have a t-shirt later I'll show you as well. So I forgot that. So now I have better systems in place that when I don't fly, I don't forget my stuff. All right, I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes. Share who gets the Killer Whale Award. What was your whoopsie daisy? Let's go. Who met somebody new? Excellent, very good. So now here's the super brave person. Who'd be willing to super briefly share their whoopsie daisy? The vulnerable place. Anybody?
All right.
Can I have a mic somewhere?
I was sharing with Leslie that my whoopsie daisy is me. My whoopsie daisy is me. I've been around this industry for a long time. I am by no means where I want to be. And I feel as though, I just have to reinvent myself. And I mentioned that treating my business has been around for 50 plus years as a startup business, and then that's it. I just have to have a little self-honesty and a little humility there.
Okay, excellent. All right. So the inside is humility, introspection, and make some changes. What I'm hearing, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Another whoopsie daisy? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I grew up in the business, and so as one that has been an applier and now up into management, it's very difficult to step back and not jump back in and answer the phone or to try and push things forward, letting people do their job. But we have a great team that gives me permission to embrace my stupid and learn from it. So,
excellent. Thank you. What's your name? Sorry.
It's Peterson, Kerry Peterson.
Peterson's first name. Peterson. Kerry's first name.
Kerry.
Okay. So thank you. So this is how many in this room are facing or have faced what Kerry's facing. If you come through the business, and then you need to actually step back from what you used to excel at. Like the reason why you maybe got promoted, why you made it to the next level is because you were outstanding at your previous job. But now a totally different skill set is required, right? So we need to actually empower, trust, and step back and even let your people make mistakes, right, in a safe space. So that is a huge challenge, I know, for a lot of us. And so what comes to mind, if I may just briefly, is what I sometimes work with folks on is literally identifying my triggers. What triggers me to jump back in? Like I actually become explicit about my triggers, write them down, and then have strategies in place so I don't just act on my impulse to step back in. So know the triggers is the first thing. And the second piece literally sometimes is, let's go through your to-do list and ask for every single item on your to-do list, who else can and should be doing this? Who else can and should be doing this? Same for decisions. Who else, how far down in a large organization can I push this decision making? What's the lowest I can push it to? And asking myself, who else can and should be doing this? And so sometimes just to, and then I get off the topic, I like that stuff because I sometimes push people work yourself out of a job. Your job is to make yourself obsolete. It's a thought experiment, but the true test of leadership is how the ship runs when you are not there. You're all right here. If your ship runs perfectly while you are here, back home, then you've passed the true test of leadership. And it's hard for all of us who came through the business. Loud and clear. Thank you for sharing. Do we have one more? All right. So, thank you for playing. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing a bit about your whoopsie daisies. Because the soft stuff is not soft. The soft stuff is tough. In the military, we often think of courage as going up against the enemy with a machine gun. And no question, that requires guts. But the real courage is being the person in the room who has the courage to say or ask things others don't have the courage to say and ask. Hey, what's really going on here? Or my favorite, what problem are we actually trying to solve? And for us as leaders, the real courage is to provide a culture where it's safe for everybody on my team to speak up with these questions and concerns. One last thing before we move up off fearlessness or psychological safety. What I sometimes hear people tell me is, look, I have team members who already take way too much airtime. Like they like the tone of their own voice way too much. Like, do you want me to give them even more airtime? I want to be very clear. Psychological safety does not mean droning on about stuff. If somebody on your team is, or maybe you're one of them, droning on too much about stuff, that's a performance issue. If that team member could benefit from hearing the sound of the voice a little bit less, then that's your job as a leader to manage that performance. It's not the same as psychological safety. We can have an incredibly psychologically safe, fearless culture with very few words spoken indeed. Despite the clear business case for fearless teams, psychologically safe cultures are still quite rare. This is exactly why a fearless culture, a psychologically safe culture, can be a competitive advantage in your contracting business. So let's start our fearless journey right here today, even if it's just with 2 stuffed animals. So let me wrap it up. Actually, before I do that, so in the spirit of having the learning continue beyond the keynote, there is resources, exercises, tools, research on my website. There's nothing for sale, to be very clear. Even if you tried, you cannot buy anything on my website. As I mentioned, I have a few books in the back if people are interested in that. So let me bring it home with one final story that embodies the 3 pillars of leading with radical humility. Check out this job ad. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. First off, excuse the totally outdated gender language. It's a very old ad. I have 2 questions for you. Who's in? Who's going to apply? Okay, there's one gentleman in the back. Second question. Who wrote the ad? Perfect. This ad is said to have been placed in London newspapers in the 1910s by Irish polar explorer Ernest Shackleton. With both the North and South Pole conquered, the one remaining polar challenge was to cross Antarctica on foot via the South Pole. And Shackleton needed 26 crew to get it done. How many do you think applied? You just saw the ad. He needed 26. How many applied? Any guesses? 5,000. You have talent shortage? Maybe take a page out of Shackleton's job ad book here. 5,000 applied. Shackleton was unconventional, unorthodox, way ahead of his time in terms of his humble leadership. Check out how he hired. He hired for life outlook and attitude and trained for skill. Hired for life outlook and attitude and trained for skill. One man he asked during the interview, "Can you sing?" And when the young man responded, "You mean like, can I hold a tune?" "Probably not." "Can I join into a rowdy sing-along together with my mates?" "Absolutely." The man was hired on the spot. After Shackleton recruited and assembled his crew of 26, he made relationship building his core number one leadership responsibility. He wanted to get to know each man on a very personal level, strengths, weaknesses, personal styles. He was tender on people by getting to know everybody. But he also could be tough on results. After they sailed across the Atlantic from England down to Argentina, the cook got terribly drunk one night and behaved totally disorderly. Shackleton knew the man was not fit for a mission and fired him on the spot. But in his tender way, he found the cook another job on a ship that sailed back to England. The crew set off from Argentina and sailed south. They didn't know it, but there would be more pain, misery, and danger awaiting them than they could ever have imagined. Just 100 miles from reaching Antarctica, their ship, the Endurance, got stuck in the thickening pack ice. They were 1,000 miles from the closest human being. Nobody knew their whereabouts. And remember, well before fancy outdoor gear like down jackets and Cortex shells. They had no choice but to settle in for a long, miserable, dark winter. During the long 10 months that followed, Shackleton made keeping morale up of his crew his number one priority. He organized regular sing-alongs, poker nights, birthdays became elaborate celebrations, and he even organized, and I love that, soccer matches on the ice and dog sled races. To fight boredom, increase stimulation, and tear down hierarchy, he had every crew member cross-train on every other position on the ship. The scientists would help peel potatoes in the galley, the photographer would help with the sled dogs, and he himself would scrub and clean the ship. Every member of the crew received the same portions regardless of rank or position, unheard of on other English ships. In today's terms, we would say Shackleton tore down silos, drove engagement, built a strong team, built trust. Because of this trust, every crew member knew it was safe to come to Shackleton with questions, concerns, and doubts. He was famous for his ability to speak to and listen to every single crew member. In the process, he built a fearless, a psychologically safe culture in the Endurance crew almost 100 years before the phrase was coined. After 10 long months, the pack ice started to shift and move. But instead of freeing the Endurance, the shifting and moving pack ice started to crush the ship and the Endurance sank. Their only hope to reach safety disappearing before their very eyes. The crew was stuck in the middle of Antarctica on floating ice with nothing more but 3 open life rafts and a pile of gear. As the ice continued to shift and move, sometimes they wake up in the middle of the night. There's a foot-wide gap under their tent. Shackleton dug deep and knew the only way to safety was to try and reach one of the small islands 200 miles away. During the 16 long, miserable days and nights at sea, Shackleton changed destination 5 times because of changing weather conditions. When conditions changed, Shackleton had the humility and the self-awareness to say, "I screwed that up," swiftly change course. After 16 long days, they arrived on Elephant Island. For the first time in 16 months, they set foot on land, but there was nobody there to help them. The crew was in terrible condition and food was running low. Shackleton dug deep again and realized now the only way to safety was to try and reach the closest whaling station 800 miles away on St. George Island, across one of the most treacherous seas in the world where 100-foot waves are the norm. He grabbed his best life raft, 5 men. It was 800 miles in an open life raft across one of the most dangerous seas in the world. They had no maps, only the stars. Miraculously, after 3 long weeks, they made it. Do we have any boaters or sailors in the room? Show of hands. Anybody a boater or sailor? I'm speaking to you specifically, but of course to everybody else as well. To this day, this is considered the greatest feat of open water navigation we know of, to this day. But they landed on the wrong side of the island. To get to the other side of the island, where the whaling station was, they had to climb over 10,000 feet high glaciated mountains. The manager of the whaling station on the other side of the island was a tough Norwegian whaler called Searle. Searle knew of Shackleton, but like the rest of the world, presumed him dead. So when Shackleton and his 5 men finally walked into the whaling station and knocked on Searle's door, he opened the door, took a step back. He had a shocked look on his face. There was a long pause, and he finally said, "Who the hell are you?" The man in the center stepped forward and in a quiet voice said, "My name is Shackleton." Searle, the tough Norwegian whaler, not exactly known for his strong display of emotions, turned around and broke down in tears. It took Shackleton another 4 months, 4 ships, 4 attempts to finally rescue the rest of his crew, who by then had been stuck in Antarctica for almost 2 years. Shackleton's mission clearly failed. Not only did he not cross Antarctica, he never even reached the continent. And yet he had the humility to recognize his failure. And through each stage of his journey, he led like a compass by being crystal clear about their common goal. First, reach Antarctica, then get through the winter, then get to Elephant Island, then get to St. George Island, then bring home everybody safe. Shackleton's voyage to this day is considered the #1 survival story ever. And his leadership is widely admired, including a Harvard Business School case study on his leadership. Why? Well ahead of his time, he applied himself to humble leadership. How? He led like a compass, he was tough on results, tender on people, and he championed a fearless culture. Quick personal anecdote. I've admired Shackleton's leadership for a long time, and I shared that admiration with my father, my dad. So in 2001, when the Seattle Maritime Museum, where I live, organized an exhibition about Shackleton's voyage, I bought my dad this T-shirt. It has the Endurance on the front, and in the back, there's a quote by one of Shackleton's crew members, which contrasts Shackleton's leadership to some other polar explorers. So a quote by one of Shackleton's crew members: "For scientific discovery, give me Scott," another British explorer. "For speed and efficiency of travel, give me Amundsen," a Norwegian explorer. "But when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton." I gave this T-shirt to my dad as a gift, and he wore it during many of our outdoor adventures together. My dad passed away in 2010, and we had a very strong bond. And ever since, I've held onto that T-shirt, both as a reminder of the strong bond I had with my dad and our mutual admiration for Sir Ernest Shackleton's radically humble leadership. Now, there's a good chance that none of us will ever cross Antarctica on foot. I'm a pretty adventurous guy, but this one I'm going to give a miss. The lesson remains, though. If Shackleton could apply himself to leading with radical humility 110 years ago, then doing exactly that is within every single person's reach in this room. So, I think we have some time. Before I wrap it, I have about a minute or so to wrap it. I would like to open it up for any questions, concerns, comments, anything from the group that you would like to discuss. I will hang around, by the way, for the rest of the day. I have a podcast at one point, but I'll be here tonight and tomorrow as well. So happy to chat one-on-one, of course, as well. But any questions, concerns, anything that doesn't work for you, that you really like, whatever.
My name is Dave. I'm with Alpine Painting. Urs, I really enjoyed your presentation. It spoke to me, spoke to the way that I want to lead the company better. I have a question around this concept of the 30-minute relationship meeting. So I like that. I think, to your point, you move at the speed of trust, right? You're not going to get to where you want to go unless that person trusts you and has buy-in. And I want to know if there is a specific outline to this relationship meeting, because I'm identifying now some of these skilled rebels in my organization that I want to better connect with to kind of bring them to the culture and create alignment. But I have to find a way to build our relationships, and I'd like some wisdom and ideas on how I can better do so.
Yeah, thank you. It's an excellent question, and it won't be a surprise that I don't have like the right answer. It's a start, but here's a few things to think about. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's people in your organization, and you're the CEO, you're their boss, right? Yeah. So, let's first be sure that they're actually feeling comfortable, right? Because by definition, there is the hierarchy. So, let's have it over a cup of coffee. And I would actually advise all of us to say, hey, I just want to, get to know each other a bit better on a personal level, like actually be as transparent as that. And then, it is a give and take. So some people you'll find, and that is, by the way, totally fine. Some people you will have pretty intimate relationships pretty quickly, like they're more than happy to share very personal things with you. And with others, it will be mainly about, the kids' soccer matches on the weekend or whatever, and that's totally fine. So we have different depth of relationships with different team members. That doesn't make us a fraud or a phony at all. It's just because they have different, and we need to respect those boundaries as well. So I think the advice I would give you is to frame it exactly for what it is. I want to get to know each other a bit better, so that we can work better together, for example, and then have them share, ask questions about what they're most excited about. If you see them being comfortable talking about their personal background, their personal life to some extent, ask them more questions there, and reveal some about yourself, right? I mean, I didn't want to get into Brené Brown, but she really is the queen of vulnerability, and she famously said, vulnerability is the last thing I want to show you, and it's the first thing I'm looking for in you. Okay, and I know this is a predominantly male-dominated blue-collar industry, much like the military, and it is so true for all of us. It doesn't matter if we're male, female, or otherwise. We build connection by seeing somebody being appropriately vulnerable. And just to be clear, we're not wearing our soul on our sleeves necessarily. Okay, so it's a give and take, and reading the room. So, help a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. All right, who else? Someone over here.
Could you give us examples of a common goal for a commercial paint company? Now, the ones that probably shouldn't be, we're like, we want to make more money or we want to save time on the jobs. So would you have any ideas for us?
Yeah. I'm happy to do so. I'm probably not the wisest person on this one in the room, seeing I'm the only one who's not in the industry. But a couple of things. So when we're thinking about the common goal for the whole organization, why we are in business, and remind me, the Aussies, what's your business called again? Archer Group, exactly. I checked them out online, and I think they're doing a beautiful job at, and correct me if I'm wrong, at making their common goal more meaningful than make money and produce beautiful building. Like, what are we really doing, right? We're making a difference in people's lives, right? We provide homes, not just houses, for example. And so at the high level, I encourage all of us to think about what difference are we really making? Like the famous ask the question why 5 times. Like, you need to keep digging. What really drives us? Because at the end of the day, none of our employees is driven by making money for the business, right? They want to make a difference. Yes, we also want to make money. We want to make the common goal so we take money off the table. So and we've all read the research, the younger generation, they want money, they want a say, they want purpose, they want meaning, and it's up to us to provide it. And we can put our heads in the sand and say, oh, we didn't have that when we were young, or we can live up to what's really going on right now. So that's at the high level. And then within your team, it can absolutely be that. Maybe the accounting group has the common goal of, whatever it might be, like we need to clean up our bookkeeping system between now and the end of the year. Or give me one action, so I'm going to have the wisdom of the room here, for our estimate. You call them estimators, right? The estimating group. So give me a potential common goal for the group of estimators. Anybody? Accuracy. Yeah, so exactly. So you presumably measure this by percentage or something like accuracy. So raise accuracy from X to Y over the next 3 months. That could be a common goal. Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't want to get too academic, but the vision, the mission, that's high level, multi-year. That's how I think about this, and that is requiring a lot of soul searching, and what I was mentioning, like we bring the whole team together. And by the way, probably should go without saying, but it still doesn't. Like, don't just come up with a vision, mission, and then expect your people to buy in. So you need to involve them in the whole process. And then, by the way, how many organizations, for those of us who've been in other organizations, have we been a part of where there's a cool vision, mission on the wall and nobody gives about it, right? Nobody lives it, right? So more important than what the piece of paper or the nice plaque says is, what stories are we as leaders telling internally and externally about how the vision came alive? What stories are we sharing? What accomplishments are we highlighting by our team members who've lived exactly that value? Last week Joe did X, Y, Z, and that exemplifies our value, superior customer service. And so to answer your question, vision, mission is really high level. When I think about common goal, I really mean it very tangible, so it doesn't become this overwhelming thing. Look, let's, in my team of 3, let's have a common goal for the next 4 weeks. I would often do this in my peacekeeping mission, actually. So these officers who, have 7 priorities and they change every week. No, like for 1 month, we focus on one thing, safety. This month, we do all the other things too, but I relentlessly communicate one thing, safety, safety, safety. And the next month, it might be a different priority. So if I just think about accuracy, the estimators, like that ties into presumably customer service, it ties into profitability, it ties into a lot of higher level goals. And by the way, if we're not profitable, we can't make a difference in people's lives. We need to stay in business to actually make a difference in people's lives, our customers, that is. Yeah. The future of leadership in commercial contracting is leading with radical humility. And it starts right here with every single person in this room. It's about the commitment we make to the sort of leader we want to be, the sort of team we want to build, and the sort of organization we want our business to grow into, and yes, the sort of world we want to live in. So here's my invitation and my challenge to all of us. While these 3 pillars are still fresh in our minds, let's, over the next 3 days, commit to one action, ever so small. Write it down on a piece of paper, commit to it before you get up and leave this room for coffee in about 30 seconds. One thing, one action, ever so small. If you can do that, if I can do that, if we can all do that together, then I'm convinced our finest days as radically humble leaders in the commercial contracting business are still ahead of us. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for the great work you're doing.